Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. This is Tychonders, and today we're having a look at something a little bit more special than usual, and that is the Predator Joytoy Predator tank from Warhammer 40,000. The Predator tank is one of the most recognizable armored vehicles in the universe of Warhammer 40,000, but its origins are far from humble than the battlefield role it might suggest. The story begins in 1988 with the release of a Space Marine Rhino kit, originally sold as a tree pack during the early Rogue Trader era. A year later, in 1989, it was reissued as a standalone kit, establishing what would become the backbone of Space Marine armored warfare. In universe, the Rhino transport is a standard template construct design valued not for sophistication but reliability, adaptability, and ease of mass production across the Imperium. This was a 10-man transport, for the Space Marines at least. That adaptability made the Rhino more than just a transport. It became the foundation. Over time, the same chassis would be reconfigured into a wide range of battlefield roles, from the missile-launching Whirlwind to the troop support Razorback and even the siege-focused Vindicator. Beyond the Space Marines, even the forces of the Lexarian adopted the design, most notably the Immolator and the ornate missile-laden Exorcist tank used by the Sisters of Battle, or as commonly known as the Adeptus Sororitas. It was this versatility that led directly to the Predator. In 1990, still under the Rogue Trader banner, the Predator tank was officially introduced. Built directly upon the classic Rhino chassis, but reimagined for frontline combat, where the Rhino carried troops, the Predator tank brought sustained heavy firepower with its turret-mounted autocannon and twin side-sponson las cannons. As the platform evolved, new variations followed, among most notably the Predator Annihilator, a configuration designed for anti-armor warfare, often equipped with powerful las cannons. The Storm las cannons, which are the twin-linked ones. The early kit revolved this evolution, combining a plastic kit with the metal armor components. It wasn't until 2002, well into 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000, that the platform saw a major redesign with the introduction of the Mark II Rhino kit. This updated chassis brought more defined, more fully plastic construction, with a modernized Predator kit that would define the vehicle for years to come. In more recent years, Horus Heresy setting revised the earlier design through the Demios pattern vehicles, which introduced a Demios pattern Rhino and its, of course, counterpart, the Demios pattern Predator, both drawing clear inspirations from their original Rogue Trader era kits. These designs reconnect the modern range with its earlier foundations. Among the many Space Marine chapters that the Blood Angels had developed their own distinct variation of the Predator, namely the Ball Predator, optimized for aggressive close combat ranged engagements, swapping out the twin-linked las cannons for twin-mounted assault cannons. They also introduced heavy flamers for the Ball Predator, so its standard loadout would be a twin-linked assault cannon and then heavy flamer sponsons. Decades later, that same lineage from Rhino transport to Predator battle tank remains instantly recognizable, now created in a modern, upscaled 1:18 form, which we'll be taking a look at in the next section of this video. So here is the Predator in pretty much most of its component pieces. I said it'd be easier to show more the component side of it than it completely assembled. So you can see there's the boxes, the power pack for the las cannons, the turret top in the back here. You got these opening doors on the side, but you also get these little, they're not ammo boxes. I suppose they would be ammo boxes. You have the radar dish for the turret. This is the top plate where the turret sits. And if I move my camera, sorry about the squeaky noise, you have the dual las cannons turret over here. I'm just going to close up this. You have the opening front, this moving section. I'll try and get some tight shots of all these things. You have the las cannons. Now it is worth noting that you have to put these together. It is worth noting that when you're pushing this up, these red covers tend to be a separate piece, so they will move and might get in the way, but the detailing on this is quite lovely. It's fairly plain on the inside because that's the way they come anyway. You see the 2 pegs where it plugs onto the chassis, but it is quite a nice piece. And then you have this piece that sits inside the turret. Now I haven't really figured out exactly how it's supposed to sit exactly. This thing here, this display, is actually movable. I'm not sure if it's intended to be movable because it looks ridiculous. When I first got it, it was like down here when I took it out of the box, and I didn't realize it until I realized that it's supposed to be kind of more head height or arm height for the Marine. In fact, because I don't have any Blood Angels, well, I don't have regular Blood Angels. I have Death Company Blood Angels, which are the V1 figures. They haven't done a V2 version of these guys yet, if they will get around to doing one. But this is one of the Blood Angels sitting in it. Now, these are V1 figures. And if you're wondering what V1 means, they're the version 1 Space Marines. They did a version 2, which, again, I don't have Blood Angels equivalent of. Let me just take his gun out of his end. Almost a Dark Angel. I do have other angels of the dark variety. So this is one of the 2.0 bodies for the Dark Angels. So he will actually stand quite high on this. That's why I was wondering about the view screen. It doesn't really go up to his head height, and it kind of sits in the chassis. It kind of just sits there. It doesn't really kind of plug in anywhere. We'll show that when I get this thing back assembled and do some close-up shots. And then for the turret, you have, this is the main turret. So it sits onto the body with that extra piece. It just plugs in. In fact, I should be able to show what I mean by this. So this thing can just sit up in here, and it kind of just friction sits in there. It doesn't plug in or lock in or anything like that, and it's supposed to kind of represent the gunner firing the cannon, I suppose. Like, it is awkward because when you have the other turret piece on, it doesn't really sit in too well. So bring in this, push this back into place. So this is the top hatch turret for the, or top hatch for the turret. You can kind of position it how you want, and then you have this piece which sits up here, which is the radar dish. It does come in 2 pieces. At least it comes in 1 piece in the box, but it can split into 2 pieces. It is worth noting that the cannons can elevate and it's opposite of elevate. It's not de-elevate, but you know, move down. You can pivot up and down, and you have you can just see these little legs inside here. So you have that. In fact, why don't I put the piece back on? So the way this is supposed to sit is the vent system is supposed to go to the back, and the turret sits in the center. They reuse this piece for the Razorback, and on the Razorback they have it turned around so that the vents are more central and the turret sits back here. So it is the same piece. This is pretty much how they are in the actual whatchamacallit, in the model kit for the actual Rhinos. So this is plugged into place. It just kind of snaps into place, and then ever so carefully you kind of sink this in and try and get it lined up, and it plugs into place. So I'll do a little bit of close-up of the internals when I get to those, but you'll see where the actual gunner sits in it. It is kind of an awkward sitting because it kind of knocks against the seats that are in there. But other than that, you have those. Then you have these 2 additional covers for the actual chassis. So you have this one that goes here, which is just a basic cover. On the Rhino version of these, there would be a storm bolter attached to the front. In fact, I do not have one handy with an actual storm bolter on it. But if I bring in a model kit of this Mark II Rhino chassis, it's not the best painted, and it's in fairly, this is my ultramarine one. You can see it's based on this chassis. The original Mark I kits are Deimos pattern, the Mars pattern Rhino. This is where the storm bolter would be, so on those they'd be up there. I do not think you can move this onto here like I have this one. On this it is just plugged in, and do I have an opening? You can even see the back of this one where it has that storm bolt, or the bolter, and the console display. When we get into the actual internals, you'll see this looks pretty much exactly how this looks, but in a larger scale. So to complete the turret, it's not fully complete. So you can turn it around. When you turn the whole thing around, you can see it's very flat in the back. What you get is this additional piece, and it may look a bit weird now because it comes with these. This sits on a specific way. Yeah, it sits on one specific way, which is this way. So these match up here. This is the power pack for the twin linked las cannon. There is the guide rails that it just sits on, and then you have your fully complete turret with twin linked Annihilator cannons. I'm just going to close up this for the moment. There's one other bit on the front of the Rhino, which is kind of, it's a nod to the original, where you can open up this weird kind of window. On the Rhino, I don't know if my one, did I glue it down? Yeah, I think I glued it down onto mine. But on the back, behind this piece on the actual Rhino kit, is where these window wipers are. So like when you lift up that, you actually see those window wipers. They kind of didn't do that for these. So it is interesting that they kind of overlooked one or two things. We shall chuck on the cannons. So again, they just plug into the side here. In fact, I can turn the whole thing around. Now I wish I had a rotating turntable for you to see this thing in rotation, but I only have to do it by hand. So this just plugs in here, and as I'm swinging around the back, I might as well showcase the fact that this has an opening rear hatch just like the Rhino. We'll get in again close-ups in a little bit. We'll just move you out of the way for the moment, and we will plug on the other one of these. It's just exactly the same as the one I just plugged on, straight on. It comes with 3 of these little cases, which has the Imperial Aquila on the box. Now there is no, at least I can't see any storage position for these in this. I do know that on the Razorback kit, which is based on this body as well, there is kind of storage that sits up here that mimics the ones on, again I don't have them on my Rhino because I never put them up, but it is a one that sits on that. So I'm going to reposition my camera and we'll have a look at some of the more closer details, and we'll get into those. So here we have a look at the more finer details of this thing. So what I'm going to do, just to give myself some extra light, is I'm going to remove the turret. Actually, before I do that, I'll show, if I can just bring it up to the light, how that gunner thing sits. It doesn't sit the best in here, but as you can see, it kind of bounces off these 2 seats that are on either side, so it doesn't really sit flush. You can put it down, but it's kind of awkward. And you can put it on this, but it just kind of doesn't, I don't think it's intended to sit like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the top turret because it'll give more light, hopefully. And I might, I'll just remove Mr. Magoo here, and we'll take this thing out of the way entirely. If I can do it. It's going to be awkward because there we go. Now that should give me a bit more light. Now you can see I actually have added a bolter or bolt rifle to the section here. In fact, if I open up the side, I might be able to squeeze in a little bit more light and take off the turret, make it a little bit easier for myself, and then open up the side panel. I might be able to showcase it a bit better that way. So here is that bolter. There is actually, just like on the small Rhino kit, there is a spot for a bolt rifle to sit. You have, you have the fine detailing of the vent stacks that have this kind of smoke damage to them. You have mud along the tracks. One of my major gripes with this and with the Rhino, or sorry, not with the Rhino, with it's a missed opportunity on Joytoy's part, is this whole track. All these tracks are static, they don't move, they don't even have wheels underneath for you to roll it along or anything like that. If these had been fully functional tracks, that would have just made this thing so much better. I mean, you could easily run it along the top here, you'd have the space, but imagine to run a track system inside just like the actual tank would have. But unfortunately they did a missed opportunity to not add that to the tank. So open this door, you can see right through to the other side. You can see the detailing of the actual paneling. You have this kind of metal grating on it. Swinging around the tank, she is a bit heavy, or it is a bit of a heavy chunky thing. You have that control panel that is painted. Now I have watched a couple of reviews for the Razorback, which is of interest because in the Razorback, so the Razorback, I know I keep mentioning the Razorback and people are kind of what the heck, some people who wouldn't be familiar with the Warhammer 40,000 universe are kind of what's a Razorback. A Razorback is similar to a Rhino where it is a dedicated troop transport, but instead of, because it has the heavy ordnance weaponry up on top, it's a remote turret, so it's not a manned turret like the Predator. There is actually a door between this section on the Razorback, and it's on the Joytoy version of it, which is interesting. So if I close this ever so slightly and try and swing this thing all the ways around, you can see those lovely las cannons. We'll have a look at their markings. So you can see this is the Blood Angel chapter logo. So this is what donates this, or donates this as a Blood Angel vehicle. And you also have Angelus on the front. If this was a Ultramarine or any other chapter, you wouldn't have this teardrop, you wouldn't have that logo on the side, and you'd probably have a different name. You could still have the Angelus name, you just had something different. And then I believe on this side you would still have one of these markings with the little skull. It's more of a tank commander symbol than anything else. And then you would still have a numbering system, this 9 on here, but you'd probably have a slightly different one, maybe a different number for the basic Rhino, or for Predator Annihilator, Predator Destructor, which is the one with the single cannon. One thing I should note as well, and it will be, well, if you watch the intro for this entire thing, which I'm hoping you did, and didn't just skip straight ahead to this section, it is interesting to me that they did this version of the Predator for Blood Angels first and not the ball type one. The ball Predator is unique in the sense that it was originally a Blood Angels only style Predator, and then I think it got rolled out to other chapters, but it was a twin-linked assault cannon version. So you have this control panel that hinges. You have a moving toggle on it. Don't think the gear stick or the handles move, but you have these moving. This brake, I believe it is. It looks like a brake. Has like a little handle, like a brake handle on it. The controls look very similar to something that you'd see in like a construction vehicle, like a crane or an excavator or something along those lines, with these I think one is the gear stick and one is the brake handle, but it's on an actual lever. And then you got some really nice detailing. You have a seat in here, and you have a whole bunch of instruments that are painted on the side here. If I move it to an angle that you can see it, it is quite dark on the interior, and I don't have an external light to shine some extra detail on. But if I take off these top pieces, which I'm just remembering are removable, even though I said they were removable earlier, you have quite nice detailing inside this, and you can fit one figure in here. So because it's Blood Angels, I will use the Blood Angel Death Company figure, and I will swap it around with the Dark Angel figure just so you can see the scale difference between the V1s and the V2 Marines. This guy's leg wouldn't pop off, it would be handy. Plug your little leggy back in again. So I'm good. I'd have to swap out to the other guy. In fact, you know, I'll swap out to the other guy waiting in the wings over here, and I bet you'll end up having the same issue with his leg. So we'll get him into a sort of a seated position, and we'll kind of slide him in. Just move those handles out of the way so it's not obstructing him. You kind of have to angle him in. Now there isn't any seat belts or anything like that, so these guys don't really care about safety. Well, mainly because they're wearing armor anyway, so I don't think it's going to be making much of a difference to them. Now I'll leave the roof things off so you can see him in there, because he's black on black basically, so it is hard for him to be spotted. But you have a quite nice console. He can hold the control grips. It's just a matter of finagling him the right direction. Get him holding both. We will do a little size comparison in a little while with a few other larger Space Marine vehicles. And get him to kind of sit down. I'll put those lids on so you can see it doesn't obstruct him while he's in here. This is supposed to be like his viewfinder for what he sees other than the big main window. So you see these on a lot of modern day tanks, that you have like, you might have a viewfinder like this or opening hatch at the front, but you also have these kind of extra viewfinder things. But he does fit in there quite comfortably. So can we say that with a 2.0? Again, I'm going to move these off just as I have them. Move you out, flip this forward, move you out, get Mr. 2.0. I'm not entirely sure if these were designed around the first edition Space Marines first and then was released, or if they were designed around the 2.0 figures and then released. But we'll try and get Mr. Dark Angel. I know it's kind of, because I don't actually have any Blood Angels, it's kind of, I have a splattering of, well, I wouldn't say a splattering, I have a majority of my entire Space Marine collection for Joytoy is Ultramarines. I have a sizable chunk of them being Black Templars. I have this poor single Dark Angel, because I was intending to pick up some Dark Angels, because I have, what's their chapter master guy called again, Azrael, who is a really cool figure. I think I did a review for him. If I have done a review for Azrael, I will put a link for it in the description. Oh, close that. It's not giving too much dark. Actually, no, it's on screen. You can see how dark it is without that lid piece on it. So you can see a 2.0 figure can fit in just as comfortably into the driver's seat as the 1.0 or the first edition or first version Space Marines. Now, mileage may vary depending on the Space Marine that you put in, because a lot of them have all these pockets and things around them. Some of them get in the way, some of them won't, and depending on which version of Space Marine you put in, like stuff like the heavy weapons guys that have like the giant backpacks will definitely not fit in there with those backpacks on, but like the basic Intercessor Space Marine should fit these no problem. So closing that up, we shall swing around to the back once more. Oop. So we can see how the Space Marines fit in the cargo compartment section deal. So again, because of the scale, if you take the backpacks off, you might get more in, but they are intended to be in there with the backpacks on. Technically, a basic Rhino chassis is supposed to be able to store 10 Space Marines. You can kind of get maybe 2 to 3 on the seats. And we'll put in a mixture of first edition ammo and the, so like, because the backpacks get in the way, they're kind of a bit of a squish. This is supposed to be in scale technically to them, but again, I think the ceiling would be 10 times bigger if it was fully exact to scale. Even these models that these are based on are actually underscaled to the Space Marines, and it comes evident when if you collect the actual game or the actual game system. Like stuff like the tanks are always been underscaled, but overall it is quite nice. So you can get 2 of them in there at least. So I'm going to fold this all up, put it into this component. We're going to pause again, we're going to zoom back out, and then I'm going to bring in this fit in here. I'll just leave this. Actually, no, this guy's foot is in the way. Let's fit on turret is in. We'll put it together with the exception of those boxes. We're going to zoom out, and I'm going to bring in some things for comparison. So we're just going to swing her back around again. My apologies for not having a turntable or anything that will actually turn this thing, but I don't think I could even fit one on this if I could. But we're going to pause here, I'm going to zoom back out, and we're going to bring in a couple of size comparisons, in universe size comparisons, but not same chapter. So we'll start off with the smallest thing that I have that's vehicle wise that's in scale, or should be in scale, and that is one of the Space Marine bikes. So this is one of the, I can't remember, I think they're just called the attack bikes. I'm not entirely sure if that's the right name for them, but you can see it is fairly dwarfed. Now I have both these in Ultramarine and, as I said, Black Templars, which is my secondary main go-to. So give me a moment while I'm just showing that to the side of it. So you can see the Black Templar bike is fairly small, even with the rider on it, to this thing. They are technically in scale, I would imagine. Before we continue with this comparison, and I keep talking about scale, I nearly forgot one thing. We'll turn this back to the side. So I forgot to do one of these. You can see how big or how long this thing is. It's about 16 inches. Much the widest point to it is to the back. Diagonally across, if you have the guns not kind of rotated out, so you can rotate these things completely 360. So if you have them out like this, obviously the profile is going to be far bigger, but if you have them in a kind of a neutral standpoint, and I'm not sure you can read this on screen, but I will read it out, it's about 14 inches. Height wise, the highest point is probably this radar dish at the very back, and to my eyes, I could be wrong, it is around 10 inches to maybe 10 and a half inches, given how I'm awkwardly trying to have a look at the thing. So it is a fairly big chunky lad. We'll move this back to where it was. My apologies for not doing that first. We have Mr. Space Marine Bike, who is in there. I'm going to move this slightly to the side so I can get the next thing in. We have another larger vehicle, and this is the Ultramarines. This is the ATV, Attack ATV, I believe it's called. So you can see it in scale there. It is fairly big for what it is in itself. It's bigger than one of the bikes. It has a fairly wide profile for like how flat and like how long it is. So like size wise, it's not that much. Well, it is a bit smaller, but it's like nearly as wide as the tank. I know it doesn't really look it, but like in person it kind of almost looks as wide as the tank. I don't see people using these much in game. This is one of like the first vehicles that Joytoy brought out in this line that actually houses Space Marines as opposed to stuff like Dreadnoughts, which is a segue for the next thing that I'm bringing in. So again, I'm going to move this over slightly even more because this next guy is fairly chunky and big as well. So I'm going to move leave him behind here. I believe this is the Redemptor class Dreadnought. I believe it's Redemptor. I can never remember the name of the different Dreadnoughts now because they've gone through. Is it the Venerable in Redemptor, and I think Contemptor is the kind of main ones. This is the more modern 40k Dreadnought, which has this cool. I can't remember how the fucking works. Oh yeah, this opens and then this opens down, so you have the opening section here that would house your not quite so dead, not quite so alive Space Marine. The whole idea of these things is it's a walking sarcophagus for fallen Space Marines who have fallen in battle but still want to continue the good fight, I suppose is the best way to say it. They're not exactly good guys and bad guys, but like you can see, Dreadnought is actually taller than the Predator. I'm not sure if it's coming across on screen, but you can see the missile pod up here is higher, so if you have this guy you kind of know how tall the Predator is. I believe the Razorback is maybe around the same height because it has the same piece, but it's just like two guns that sit up here at this section at the back, so it's probably around the same, maybe close to the same height as a Dreadnought. When I get one, I will do a review of it because it will be in Ultramarine colors and it will be matching with this. But like you can see, this thing has a heavy plasma cannon, I think, or it's a plasma incinerator, I think they're called now. So it has a fairly big armament. It's almost as on par with this, but it is quite a big chunky thing. So I am going to wrap up my review slash documentary slash I need this for college review of this thing. I am hoping I will have this all nicely put together in a nice little package so people will enjoy this a little bit more than my standard videos. But it is something of interest. I love the Joytoy line. Do I regret buying a Blood Angels thing when I don't have too many Blood Angels to go with it? Not really. I was intending, or at least I still am, I might consider stripping this thing, repainting it to Ultramarines. As I said, the Ultramarines have, like, you know, the numbering on the Ultramarine tank would be more close to this style than this is more of a Blood Angel style marking. But like, I'm kind of tempted to leave this as is. My intention originally was to repaint it to match either these guys or the Black Templars. I think because it looks so cool, I think I might just leave it as is and maybe, just maybe, get a small contingent of Blood Angels to man and pilot this thing, or I might just go crazy and paint the whole thing in Ultramarine colors. By the way, as he just leans and collapses things, but the overall detailing on this is nice. You have some highlighting, edge highlighting on it. You have some like wash for the sections of it, so repainting this into Ultramarines wouldn't be too difficult, you know, and you could probably, if you can disassemble it, I'm not sure how it assembles, but if you could disassemble it enough, you could probably save a lot of trouble without having to paint and spray or just mask off a lot of the kind of already done details. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video review. As always, please like, follow, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the view for wherever you are in the world. Cheers, thanks again.